Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. We'll give it just one more minute and then we will begin our session today. Thanks.
When you're driven to get the job done right, the days are long and the miles are many. You can't accept good enough, and you don't believe in limits. To make something truly better than before, to make it last, you never settle and demand a higher level of precision. Day in and day out, we're on that path, advancing filtration science, developing superior filtration technologies to keep you going, to ensure your performance now and in the future, to protect, to go further, to keep you going. Run cleaner, longer, with the certainty of filtration science.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our Fleetschool live training session today and taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of our session. As you hopefully are in the right place, we're going to be talking about coolant and cooling system maintenance today as part of Fleetguard. My name is Jay Stevenson. I'm the North American training leader. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee, here in the United States. I've been with Atmos Filtration Technologies and going back into the Cummins filtration days for the last 11 years, and really excited to be spending some time with you guys today. I've also invited one of my colleagues along, William Huff. He is a materials science engineering chemist for Atmos Filtration Technology. So I thought it'd be very pertinent to have him along. And as we get into questions and answers as we go through our session, William's going to be helping answer some of those questions that you guys may have if you are wanting to submit those into that Q&A window or into the chat window as we go along in real time. And then certainly at the end, we'll try to make a few minutes for questions and answers there. So feel free to hang on to your questions to the end. But if you want to ask questions as we're going along, please feel free to do that. And we'll try to answer those in real time as we're going along through the material. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of jump right into it. Our plan for today is kind of twofold. We're going to talk really on the front end about engine coolant and kind of basics around engine coolant, things you would want to know, things that may either help you as you're maintaining equipment yourself or maintaining a fleet, or if you're in the business of selling coolant products to customers that are taking care of their diesel powered equipment. These are really good basic fundamental principles that will really help demystify a lot of the things that are sort of misunderstood about coolants and antifreeze products out in the market today. We're also going to spend kind of on the back half a little bit of time on cooling system maintenance. So getting into things around test strips, how often you should be testing. We'll talk a little bit about cooling system cleaning products, water filters or coolant filters, things sort of along those lines. So if that is information that'd be helpful to you, please make sure you stick around to the end. I think that'll be really good to kind of cover all of our bases here, not only the products you choose to use, but how to take care of them properly through the course of their useful life. So let's just jump right into it. So as you think about engine coolant, what is it? What's it designed to do for the system? And, why do we need it? Well, with a combustion engine, it does that combustion process generates heat. And so we need to remove that heat and dissipate that heat out of the system so that that engine can continue to run. If that engine is not being properly cooled, as many of you know that engine will overheat and it's going to stop working. Things are going to break. Stuff gets very expensive to repair. So that cooling system is critical in making sure the engine does what it's supposed to do and lives that long, nice, healthy, productive life. So it's all about temperature control and keeping that system free of heat and removing it out of there. So in order to do that, we've got to have the right combination of ingredients to give us that coolant product that's going to give that right level of performance. And so if we kind of take a step back from the whole coolant conversation, I know some folks, I already had people emailing me saying, "Can we please make sure we talk about color?" Yes, we will get into color. But I want to start, even at a more basic level of that, of what's in an engine coolant. So it doesn't matter whose product you're talking about, what brand, there are some basic ingredients that make that engine coolant what it is. And really, there's kind of three main ingredients. So the first major ingredient that we're interested in is water. Water on its own is really good at absorbing and conducting heat. So water is one of the predominant ingredients that goes into making a heavy duty engine coolant. Now, really, your one watch out here with water is that, there's a couple different types of products you can buy in the marketplace today. You can buy pre-mix coolant that already has the water mixed in at the appropriate concentration and, certain purity requirements and all those kinds of things. That is our general recommendation, to use a pre-mix coolant that's ready to use. Kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of the equation. But coolant companies and coolant blenders, we do sell a concentrate version of our coolant so that you can mix with your own water supply. It's really important to note that if that is something that you do, or you have customers that are buying concentrate coolant and mixing themselves, that water quality is very important. Don't assume that just because the water is safe enough for you to drink, that it's going to also give you the right kind of performance outcome if you're mixing it in with a concentrate product. So, just tap water, things like that have lots of different things that are added into them. I live here in Middle Tennessee. We've got a lot of limestone in the ground, so generally our water supply is very hard. We have hard water. So when you think about scale buildup that happens around your faucets, or maybe your shower head, things like that, that is kind of an indication of that hard water. And so if you're mixing hard water in with your concentrate coolant to get that final product, it can have some negative effects on the performance of that product. So water quality is very important. That's generally why we recommend pre-mix. Then the second ingredient we're interested in, so we've got water, and now we're interested in the base, or glycol. If you've ever heard glycol referenced around heavy duty engine coolants, this is kind of what we're talking about here. It's the base of that coolant product. And really, what the base does, or this glycol, what it does is it's going to take that natural boiling point of water and it's going to raise that boiling point. And if you consider that natural freeze point, that lower temperature, it's going to lower that freeze point. So it's giving greater thermal range to the capability of that coolant product. So that's really what your base, or what that glycol is designed to do. It's really about extending those limits of the temperature that that coolant can see. There's two main types of glycol or bases that are used out there in coolants today. The most common by far is going to be ethylene glycol, or EG. So if you've ever been looking at a coolant label or something like that, and you've seen the EG on there and you were like, I don't know what that's about. That's just specifying the type of base that's being used, the type of glycol, ethylene glycol. It is toxic, so that's kind of the downside to an EG coolant, but it does offer the best in terms of freeze protection. So if you're in an extremely cold weather area, that part of the world where you get really cold winters, an EG coolant is going to fare a little better than the alternative, which the alternative is a propylene glycol coolant, or PG coolant. They're typically less commonly used. PG coolants are usually a little bit more expensive. They are non-toxic though, and that's kind of the differentiator. So there are certain industries, such as food and beverage, haulers and people like that that may have a requirement to use a non-toxic coolant product. I know Will and I visited a fleet this summer down in Dallas, Texas, that they are going to be using a propylene glycol coolant because they haul food and beverage products. So there may be specific requirements of the customer that would dictate them needing to use a PG coolant. And so that's kind of the main differences there between those two. So we've got two of our three ingredients. These are really focused on the thermal, and temperature aspect of the coolant itself. So we're interested in, boil over and freeze protection. And then that third ingredient is really kind of a package of ingredients, which are referred to as the additive package. So when you think about the actual chemical protective qualities of the coolant that are going to keep that engine from experiencing all sorts of various chemical reactions that can negatively affect the life of that engine, this is where that additive package comes into play. And this is the one ingredient of those three ingredients that's going to be really the most different or unique between one brand of coolant and somebody else's brand of coolant. So think about kind of the secret recipe, the secret sauce, part of the formulation of that coolant. That's what's tied up in that additive package. You can see there, there are certain things that additive protect package is designed to protect against, things like liner pitting, scale. We're going to look at a few of those examples here next. So one of those things that you should have protection against is cavitation and erosion, particularly with water pump components. So if you've ever seen anything like this on the screen in front of you, these water pump impellers or the housings there for those water pumps, where it looks like little bites and little chunks have been taken out of the metal, that should be a red flag to you. That should be an indication that the coolant product that was being used on that engine was not providing the adequate protection that it needed to keep that system happy and healthy. And then basically what happens here with these water pumps is as these impellers spin around and circulate that coolant, you get these little bubbles that will form in the system and they pop and implode, basically burst on the surface of that metal. And under pressure, it'll take little bites and little chunks out. So if you're using a coolant that's formulated appropriately, that shouldn't happen. That's something that's going to be protected against, and those little bubbles will still form and burst, but it's got a kind of a chemical coating that creates a barrier so those little bubbles don't basically take little bites and chunks out of the metal over time. So if you're seeing a lot of this kind of thing, or you're seeing a common thread of, we're experiencing a lot of premature water pump failures, that could be an indication to start asking some questions about the coolant product you're using. Another thing, we mentioned liner pitting. So again, this is a similar situation where basically by nature of that combustion process, you've got some vibration that occurs inside the engine. And so on those cylinder walls, you get a little bit of, again, these little bubbles that will form and burst on the surface. And that will, if not protected against, will continue over time. And you can actually eat your way through the metal, and then you start getting things that start to mix, oil and coolant and things. So that could be an indication, right? You've got some sort of failure going on there as a result of not having the proper protection from the coolant product that's being used. So a couple things to watch out for. So a question that I would want to know is, okay, these additives you're talking about, do those wear out? Like, are those being used up through the life of the coolant? And the short answer is yes. So coolant does have a useful life, just like engine oil has a useful life, right? So over time, as that engine oil starts to break down because of oxidation, and that oil that used to keep all the contaminants and things, the stuff that we don't want to be in the engine, as it kind of keeps that stuff in suspension. Over time, when those additives start to deplete and wear out, that's when your oil starts to kind of clump up and clog up and agglomerate into, what you could commonly refer to as engine sludge, right? So similarly with your engine coolant, that coolant additive package can wear out over time, and you need to make sure you are taking care of that coolant product. There are concentrated coolant additives called SCAs, or supplemental coolant additives. If you've been using Fleetguard products over the years, you'll commonly see those referred to as DCA, or diesel chemical additive. These are concentrated additives that you can actually put back into the cooling system to kind of recharge or replenish that add pack and keep that coolant protecting the system the way it's supposed to. Now, if you're not testing, which we know the industry is not necessarily the best at probably staying on top of testing and maintenance. If you're not testing, you really don't know what's happening inside of that system. And you don't know if you need to be replacing or replenishing those coolant additives until maybe you start having problems. So, we definitely recommend routine testing. That's really the only way to know what's happening inside of the system. And it's going to tell you exactly how many of those additives to put back in the system if you're using a coolant that does require the use of these concentrated additives. And if you're just guessing, is it possible? You might be wondering the question, can I put too many additives back in? You can. Yes, absolutely. So this is an instance here on the left. You may have seen this if you've been around the industry a long time, where you see kind of this gel-like substance kind of forming up either in the water filter, the coolant filter, or possibly in the radiator parts of the cooling system. And yes, this is a result of basically too many additives in the system. So if we're just guessing and we're pouring concentrated additives back in the system and we're not really doing the math to understand how much we need, you can see something like this happen. And basically, what is happening is it's kind of like when you were a kid, maybe when you're making a pitcher of lemonade, or I'm a 90s kid, right? So Tang was around when I was a kid. You can only put so much of that powder in solution in the water before it's no longer soluble, right? And then it starts to kind of clump up and agglomerate kind of at the bottom of the pitcher. Same thing if you're making coffee. You can only put so much sugar in that coffee before you're just gonna have sugar sitting at the bottom of the coffee mug. So that's basically what we're talking about here, and that can happen. So if you've ever seen that, that would be an indication, hey, we're putting too many additives back in the system. So let's get right to it, right? Color. I literally had somebody email me before the call, hey, please make sure you talk about color today. So if I were to ask you guys, and feel free to drop in the chat, if I were to ask you guys, which coolant color is the right coolant color to be using in a modern diesel engine, what would you guys say? I'll give you guys a second to put that in the chat window or the Q&A window. Which color is the right color to be using on a modern diesel engine? All right, I got one vote for blue. Any other guesses? All right, well, the answer, of course, yeah, any color, right? Yeah, the answer, of course, is hey, color doesn't really matter. Yeah, I see red. I see depends on the manufacturer. Yeah, color doesn't really matter all that much. Color is not standardized across the industry, and many different manufacturers will use different colors depending on the application, depending on the type of product that's being used. And so, it can become a very dangerous practice to service and maintain diesel engines based on color alone. If a vehicle comes in and it has orange in the system, is it safe to just put any orange back in the system? Not necessarily, right? I would say that's not a good best practice. There are a few things that you would want to know as far as looking at the label of the product or looking at the safety data sheet of the product to really understand, all right, is this the right product I should be using? And is it compatible with the product that is supposed to be in the system? We're going to talk about a few of those things today just to really kind of level set and just good objective information to the next time you go, either choose a coolant for your application, or maybe you're trying to help a customer find the right application. There's a few things to look for. I've just got on the screen, right, a few brands that are out there in the marketplace today, at least specific to North America. And you can see, sometimes there's a little bit of consistency with the color across types, but it's not really something that's reliable. This is another kind of look here from a document I got from one of our OE friends here in North America. And you can see, based on the columns that run top to bottom, the different types of coolant products and the different colors that are out there. Well, I mean, first of all, you'll notice just how, the variety of makes and types of coolant that are out in the marketplace, but certainly a variety of colors as well. And so, just going on color alone, not a good best practice. So a couple of ways we can kind of look at all of those coolant products that are out in the marketplace today and sort of break them down is by looking at them one of two ways. One way we can look at them is by performance, which we're going to come back to, but the other is by type. And so, as you think about, these are just kind of generic names, generic terms that are used in the marketplace today to sort of group coolants based on the technologies that are used and the way they're formulated. So, a conventional coolant, or also called a legacy coolant. You get into hybrid coolants, which are also referred to sometimes as ELC or extended life coolants. And then the more modern types that are out there with organic acid technology coolants, or oat coolants, as they're often referred to. There are some variations of those out there as well. But this is kind of a way to sort of talk about technologies, is these type names. Performance specifications, though, we're going to kind of circle back to that and get into that next. But these are actual specifications that tell what type of coolant it is or where it's compatible, based on actual rules and specifications. So there are industry specifications. One of the governing bodies out there is called the American Society for Testing of Materials, or ASTM. They would be similar to like an ISO group out there, or SAE group. They don't just work with coolant; they work with all sorts of different things, right? But they set industry standards, and we're going to look at one of those ASTM numbers next. Cummins, though, just like Cummins or Detroit or Caterpillar, any of these engine OEMs, people that actually manufacture engines or powertrains, they often have their own specifications as well, which kind of build on top of an industry spec. So let's go look at those next. So these are some numbers. I would encourage you, if you have a pen or something that you can write down some notes, these would be some great things to pay attention to here. If you are servicing or maintaining or helping customers maintain heavy duty diesel applications, the number that you're really interested here is this ASTM D6210 number in the middle of the screen. So again, this is an industry specification, the industry specification for a heavy duty diesel engine. So what this says is, hey, this coolant has been formulated and meets all the requirements of a heavy duty diesel application, and specifically calls attention to protection against liner pitting and that scaling that we talked about, things that are common to heavy duty diesel engines. So this is the bare bones minimum spec, regardless of what brand or type of coolant you're using. If it's a heavy duty diesel engine, you need to look at the label of that product. Look at the jug. Look at if it's coming in a drum or tote, or again, if you can look at the safety data sheet. If you do not see D6210 anywhere on that, that should be a red flag. That should be a red flag that, hey, this product may not necessarily meet, or probably doesn't meet the industry specification for a heavy duty diesel engine. You'll notice the spec on the left. That's D3306. This is your light duty automotive grade engine coolant. So if you walked into any auto parts store and picked up a gallon jug of coolant sitting there, odds are that's going to be a coolant that meets the D3306 spec, but may not necessarily meet that D6210 spec. So those are a couple of basic things, again, basic things to look for that will point you in the right direction. Now, on top of that bare minimum industry specification, you will see your OEM specifications. And again, these are generally called out by the engine manufacturers themselves. Just because of our familiarity with Cummins, I'm pointing attention to the Cummins specification here, which is Cummins Engineering Standard, or CES 14603. This is Cummins spec that basically builds on top of that D6210 spec and says, hey, this coolant not only is approved to meet and meets all the requirements of that industry spec, but it also meets these specific things that Cummins, as an engine manufacturer, calls attention to, which you'll notice there. The coolant has compatibility with silicone hoses, seals, elastomer materials, which we're going to look at in just a minute of why they call attention to that. So every engine OEM is going to have their own. They'll all be a little, they're going to have their own number. They're going to have their own nomenclature for that. But it would be important to understand, hey, is the coolant product I'm using meeting that specification? So if I have a Volvo engine or a Detroit engine or again, a Caterpillar engine, is that coolant product, does it specify that it meets those requirements? So, where would I know to go look for a list of coolants that do meet those that Cummins CES 14603 spec? You can actually go find this out on Cummins Quick Serve. I know we've got quite a few folks on the call from the Cummins channel here in North America, across US and Canada. So, if you know where to go look in Quick Serve, if you're not sure where to look, reach out. We can get you pointed in the right way. But there is a list of products that not just Cummins, not just Fleetguard products, but all coolants that are registered to meet that specification. That would be a place you could go look. So, why does Cummins call attention to compatibility with silicone materials? So this is one of those things that you can look for. Again, look for on the label of the product, look for on the safety data sheet of the product. And it is one of the ingredients that is commonly used in formulating that additive package that we talked about, right? So that third ingredient, that additive package with different ingredients, this is one of those ingredients that's often used out in the industry today. It is called 2-ethylhexanoic acid. 2-ethylhexanoic acid. I know that's a mouthful. Learn that. That's a good $64 word you can use at your next dinner party to impress your friends. 2-ethylhexanoic acid. What's the deal here? Why is it not recommended? Well, it's known to be extremely aggressive on silicone materials, which are often used in modern diesel engine cooling systems. So when you think about hoses, head gaskets, seals, right, all those things that we just talked about in the Cummins specification, 2EH is really aggressive on that stuff. So silicone is a material which is an elastomer. It should be nice and flexible and bendy. And 2EH essentially goes to work on that material and causes it to lose that flexibility and causes it to kind of shrivel up and shrink up. And so, some red flags would be if you've ever seen uh, any of these materials, hoses especially, that have a lot of cracks and start, kind of uh, disintegrating basically from the inside out. That would be a red flag to know, hey, the coolant, what coolant product am I using? Does it have 2EH in it? And should I be avoiding that? Something to be on the lookout for. And you might be asking, well, why would a coolant formulator use 2EH? It's a cheap ingredient. And as you go about, running a business and you're looking to cut costs in certain places, this is one of the ways that cost can be cut. It's a cheaper ingredient to use. And if you're not using 2EH, you do have to use something else in its place. And typically the things that would be used in place of it are more expensive, but they don't cause issues with silicone. So something to pay attention to there. Again, this is one of those things you can look for on the product label. Sometimes it will actually be listed in the ingredients. Sometimes the coolant company will, the blenders, the people selling the product, try to be a little trickier with it, where they'll say proprietary ingredients, and you can kind of go dig into that a little bit more, and that's where you'll find 2EH. So and Will, feel free, at any point if you want to drop in the chat, some notes on any of this stuff. I think that's helpful for everybody as well. Another red flag, something else that we see very prevalent here in the North America market, is recycled coolant. So hopefully you guys have not run into this stuff before, but this is something that we do see in the North America market. Typically, these are being sold as very low cost solutions. One of the other things we often see with these are generally, these are companies, smaller companies that will approach customers offering to take away their used fluids, so their old oil, their old coolant. And when they do that, they're basically taking it back and not really properly going through the actual steps to recycle the coolant and make it usable again in the future. And so, if you can imagine one of these operations going to, a dozen different sites, taking everybody's old coolant, going back and basically putting it into kind of the same pot, not really handling that properly, and they go back out and redistribute it, you're not only getting not getting the things that you need in that coolant product, you're also getting kind of a compounding effect of all the negative stuff that is basically a kind of being batched together from all the other customers they're going and picking up. It really is a nightmare product. And there's, what you'll see there on the screen on the right side in the red box, there are no industry standards for recycled coolants, which should automatically raise some concern. So if we think about good, legitimate product in the marketplace, it is truly a guessing game of what you're going to get. We have tested a lot of these recycled products out of our laboratory to see, what the chemical composition is, and I don't believe we've ever had one come back that was in the spec of where it needed to be. There is a proper way to recycle coolant and get it back to a usable condition, but it's generally cost prohibitive. So again, if somebody's approaching you, selling you this product, or maybe they've come to one of your customers and they're selling them on a really great deal, it's very, hey, I'm getting this at a great price. Usually that's a situation where it's too good to be true. So please be aware of that, pay attention to that, and make sure your customers understand what they actually are using. Sometimes people are using recycled products and they don't even realize that they are. So please be aware of that. What are some common issues that can happen if you're using one of these? What we see, some of the things listed here on the screen, premature failure of things like radiators, EGR coolers, other components that have aluminum as a part of their composition. As we mentioned with the 2EH, silicone materials, so hoses, heater hoses, seal failures, head gaskets, we typically see that. Water pump failure is something we usually see with recycled coolant. We mentioned the head gaskets. You've got rapid pH drop, which that would be an indication that the coolant is becoming overly acidic. And if once it's got a lot of acid content in there, acid's going to start going to work on your steel and cast iron components. So if you start noticing that the color of the coolant is changing to kind of a brown rust color, that might be an indication that this is taking place inside of the cooling system and inside of the engine block. And of course, if once you get to that catastrophic engine failure level, you're talking about total engine rebuilds. Very, 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 very expensive. Something else to watch for that we see, again, we know folks out there tend to be very price sensitive, cost sensitive. They're looking at the top line of their business and trying to reduce cost. So sometimes we still see these legacy coolants out there that are classified under, again, an industry standard, but a different one than what we're interested in. And that's the D4985 standard. And what this is basically, this is the old school way to get a heavy duty engine coolant. So what it is basically an automotive grade engine coolant that you have to add supplemental coolant additives to at the first time of use to turn it into a heavy duty engine coolant. This is kind of what we had back before kind of modern engine coolant technologies. So a lot of times these products will say on the front, heavy duty engine coolant. And then you go read the fine print, like you see there on the bottom right side of the screen, and it says for heavy duty applications only. The use of supplemental coolant additives, or SCAs, is required. And so what a lot of folks do, it's just like when we were in school, we start working on the worksheet before we actually read the directions, and people will see heavy duty on the label and they just pour it right in the cooling system and go off to the races, right? They start their engine up and they go. And they have not actually done what they were supposed to sort of turn it into that heavy duty engine coolant. And now they think they're getting heavy duty protection when they're really getting light duty protection. OEMs do not use this stuff today. They have moved on from this. And so, the recommendation here would be you really should move somebody away from this if this is a product that they're still using. Again, this is something you would be able to look for on the label, that D4985 specification. If you do not see D6210 anywhere on there, that's something you would want to pay attention to and know, hey, this is not really formulated to be a heavy duty engine coolant. All right, so we've kind of talked about specifications. We've talked about some things you can look for. Let's talk about coolant types and kind of continue to break that down a little bit. So conventional coolants, right? These are oftentimes also referred to as legacy coolants. Generally speaking, I know we said we don't want to talk about color all that often, but generally speaking, these are still kind of your green coolants that are out in the marketplace today. Over the counter pricing usually is usually the lowest. So, oftentimes people are using these because They're either familiar with them because they've been around the industry a long time. It's what they grew up on, or maybe somebody else educated them because they were around the industry a long time, and it's cheap. These are coolants that, while they can be useful, you can use these products today. We sell a conventional coolant with our Fleetcool product. They do require a lot of hand holding. So they typically have the shortest service interval. They require more maintenance than other types of coolants. And so, if you really want to get the benefit out of these products, you really are going to have to watch them a lot more closely. And again, from what we have seen all through our experience in this industry, is most people are not watching their coolant maintenance very closely. So, probably not the best solution. And from a technology perspective, there are better technologies out there. That moves us up to our next category, which are called hybrid coolants. Again, sometimes they're referred to as ELC or extended life coolants. They are a pretty significant jump up in terms of technology and protection and life and that sort of thing from a conventional coolant. Um, but there are even still some better options than these out in the marketplace today. The reason they're called a hybrid, they kind of take some of the good things about a conventional coolant and sort of blend them with some of the other technologies that are out there as well. And so that's where you get a little bit of that hybrid name from. The coolant Fleetguard coolant products that fit in this category would be your ES Complete. So for those folks that have been around Cummins engines a long time and maybe around Fleetguard a long time that know of the blue coolant, that is our ES Complete coolant. We also offer a Fleetcool EX product. That's maybe a little bit more of a niche product for kind of legacy Detroit engine applications, but both of those kind of fall into our hybrid category. And that moves us into our organic acid technology coolant. I think I saw somebody had dropped in the chat what the NOAT stands for. So that is a nitrided organic acid technology coolant. So the two products we offer sort of in the oat family today is our ES Complete Oat. That's the product on the right. And then we do have an ES Complete Note, which is again, a nitrided organic acid technology coolant. So really the nice thing about an organic acid technology coolant, why OEMs are factory filling with these today, they offer really the best protection in terms of, that additive package that we talked about. They also offer the longest life and really the least amount of maintenance. So as you kind of think about, do I want a product that's maybe cheaper on the front end, but I have to really do a lot to get the performance out of it? That's kind of what you see more on the legacy or conventional side, where we're on this end of the spectrum with these oat coolants. Yeah, they're a little bit more expensive, but in terms of life of the product, you get a much longer lasting product. You get a product you don't really have to babysit very much, and it's going to give you really great performance in terms of protection. So one thing to point out here on the nitrided oat, so that NOAT coolant, you'll see that EC1 compatible. So EC1, that would be that Caterpillar performance specification. We talked about those OEM specs earlier. CATS is EC1. So that note coolant was something that we formulated really to provide benefit for anybody using CAT engines that wanted a Fleetguard coolant that would be compatible. So let's kind of take another look at these. One thing I want to point out, so that bullet point at the top, our coolants are fully formulated. That means you don't have to add supplemental coolant additives at the first time of use, kind of like that old school technology we talked about with the 4985. You don't have to do that. These are all heavy duty right out of the container. They all do meet that industry standard, that D6210. And then we have a couple of OE specs called out here just because of our main market here in North America. So we've got the Cummins spec there, CES 14603. And then we've got that Detroit spec, which I'm not going to read all those numbers and letters out, but that Detroit heavy duty spec, which you've got the footnote at the bottom. So our Fleetcool EX product and our ES Complete Oat are formulated and approved to meet that Detroit spec. So if you were running Detroit engines, those are coolants that you could use alongside that Detroit application. I'm not going to spend much time on it today, but you may be noticing on the right side of the screen that we have a Fleetguard product that is formulated for fuel cell and battery electric vehicles. If you happen to be on this call and touch any of those applications today, I know those are still probably low volume out in the marketplace today. Electric applications, kind of in the heavy duty space, medium duty space. We do have a product though. It's called Guardian. It's technically not a coolant. It's really a thermal fluid. I think is the term we're supposed to be using. But if you've got any questions on that, please feel free to send a note over, or drop something in the chat, and we will be glad to connect with you kind of offline afterwards. I was just, for the sake of time, I wasn't going to get into that too much today, but if you're interested in that, please reach out. So just to talk a little bit about ES Complete Oat, again, I think there's a lot of benefit in using this product. It is a 1,000,000-mile life of the engine coolant, not off highway space, 20,000 hours. And the kicker here is you do not have to use any supplemental coolant additives or extenders with that product. So in terms of a product where you can kind of just top off and go, this is a product that you would do that. So we're going to talk on the maintenance side of things in a few minutes about test strips and adding SCAs back in and all that stuff. And if all of that sounds confusing, or maybe is too much hassle, just use ES Complete Oat, and you don't have to do that stuff. So it kind of makes life a little bit easier. One of the other things we really like about it, you'll see there that first red line across the screen, suitable for all makes and all models. This is a coolant that, because of its formulation where it is nitrite, amine, phosphate, silicate free, it does not have 2-EH in it. It's borate free. This is a coolant that is formulated to work very well across light duty, medium duty, heavy duty, high horsepower. You could put this in a passenger vehicle, automotive type application. Works really well across the board. And the main reason for that is it's formulated to be very compatible with aluminum. So, as we're moving to a little bit lighter applications, lighter, even on the heavy duty side of things, there's more aluminum being used. So we talked about heat exchangers, all those types of things. This is a product that works really well with that. And so we've seen a lot of benefit for customers that may have been carrying multiple types of coolant in their shop, because they're taking care of, several different, they've got kind of a mixed fleet of vehicles or mixed fleet of equipment, forklifts, skid steers, all kinds of different things. This is one that you can basically consolidate all that inventory down into one product and use across the board with all of your applications. So it makes life a lot easier. So really a great product. We could talk more about that. If you've got more questions on our ES Complete Oat, that's a product we really like, and we've seen customers get a lot of benefit out of using and switching over to. So we're going to shift a little bit. We're going to pivot here with a little bit of our time and talk about maintenance. So let's get back to what we talked about earlier with, do coolant additives wear out? Do they deplete? The answer is yes. Like we said, they do over time. So if you're using a coolant that does need to be replenished with supplemental coolant additives, you can buy concentrated additives. So these are some of the part numbers we've got here on our screen from a Fleetguard perspective. So again, we've got those DCA or diesel chemical additive products. DCA2 is what you would use for Fleetcool and Fleetcool EX, or again, if you're using a coolant that has nitrite in it, DCA4 is the product you would use for our ES Complete or our blue coolant. Again, kind of getting back to that. So that's one that you would be using a phosphate or molybdate inhibitor package. But again, if all of this sounds like, hey man, that's a lot to kind of keep up with, and I'm not sure exactly what I should be doing there, if you move over to ES Complete Oat, you don't have to worry about this stuff at all. Kind of goes out the window. So how often should I be testing to know if I need to be adding SCAs back into the system, or what's going on there? How often should I be testing? And this is kind of, again, pointing out the differences between these types of technologies. If you're using one of those conventional or legacy coolants, really you should be testing at every oil drain. So that could be pretty frequently, depending on what that drain interval looks like for your application. If you move up to one of those hybrid or extended life coolants, really that number jumps up to about 150,000 miles. That's 240,000 kilometers, 4,000 hours, and 4,000 hours, or again, annually, whichever comes first. So a pretty significant jump there from a conventional to a hybrid. But then you can see the real benefit of using one of those organic acid technology coolants, where that number jumps all the way to 300,000 miles. So we don't even need to test it until we get to 300,000 miles. or 480,000 kilometers. So really a significant jump there. Again, if you hit those numbers before the course of 12 months rolls over, then do that. If it's maybe a static piece of equipment like a gen set or something like that, at least once a year you should be testing that system to see what's going on inside. So how do we actually go about the testing process? So if we're going to go through this testing process, a couple of things that you can test for. So one of these here is our quick check three-way test strip. So really the main thing we're testing for here in this test is really pH. And we mentioned about the system becoming too acidic earlier. Well, it could become too acidic or it could become too basic. And if it's not, if it's kind of not in the middle of where that should be, it's not good on either side of the equation. And then this is really kind of your canary in the coal mine test. So when you think about maybe you've got a piece of equipment that has not been tested in a long time, or you bought a used truck or used vehicle or used piece of equipment, you have no idea what's in the cooling system, but you're not necessarily wanting to drain the system out and replace. You can test with this quick check test strip and see what the pH looks like. And if that pH is out of balance, if it's way out of spec, you really are in a drain and replace situation. So rather than kind of going through a bunch of other things, just kind of start here, and that pH will kind of tell you what you need to do next. Beyond that, we've got a YouTube video that walks you through exactly how to do that in about 3 minutes. Super easy. The next thing you can look at is water quality. So let's say you are a customer, or you've got customers that do buy the concentrate coolant and they want to mix themselves. They really should be using these test strips. So these water quality test strips are going to test, again, that water hardness. They're going to test pH. They're going to test chloride. And it's just a simple pass fail. And that's going to tell you, hey, is this water safe to be using in mixing with that concentrate product to get, finished good coolant. So again, YouTube video, less than 2 minutes. It's going to tell you exactly what to do. Then we get to actually testing the freeze point and getting a little bit more in depth in terms of, do I need to add SCAs back in the system, and if so, how many? So we have our three-way test strips, and they are testing there for the freeze point, again, that cold protection level. They're testing the molybdates and nitrites, which again have to do with kind of the chemical protective aspect of the coolant. I would say a pro tip here would be, we've got a handful of different part numbers for these, but those two part numbers I've got listed, those are actually individually foil wrapped. So, you can buy them where it comes in like a bottle, I think a 50 count or something like that. Sometimes people forget to put the lid of that bottle back on, or the bottle gets knocked over. The little foil wrap strips are great because it's, individual use. So pretty handy there. This would be used on any coolant containing nitrite. So it's not necessarily limited to just Fleetguard coolants with nitrite. These are going to work pretty well with other coolants that have nitrite in them. Again, YouTube video will walk you right through that process, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, let's say you are using our ES Complete Oat. There is a 4-way test strip kit that comes with that. It's testing, again, for freeze point, nitrite, molybdate, and it's also testing for pH. So this one kind of does it all. This is really specific to ES Complete Oat because oat coolants are a little bit more unique in the marketplace. We can't verify that this is going to work great with other people's oat coolants, but it definitely will work with our ES Complete Oat because that's what it was formulated to do. So YouTube video, pretty straightforward. We'll walk you through exactly what to do there. Makes the process really straightforward and simple. And again, when you use this, it's really just telling you, hey, do we need to add more coolant back in the system? Top off with new or dilute, whatever we need to do there. But we're not going to use any supplemental coolant additives. So it kind of takes all that stuff out of the equation. So that would be one thing to pay attention to with ES Complete Oat. And then the last thing I've got here is, from a testing and maintenance perspective, is the refractometer. So if you've never seen one of these little guys, but you live in a cold weather climate, so you live somewhere where it gets really cold during the wintertime, a lot of snow, sub-zero or sub-freezing temperatures, that kind of thing, we really do recommend that you should have one of these and know how to use it. Basically, what you're doing is you are taking a little sample of your coolant and you are putting it on a little droplet on the little uh, lid there. You'll flip the little lid down, and then you look through the viewfinder side of it, kind of like a little scope, little periscope, and your readout's going to look like what you see on the right side of the screen. So it's basically telling you, hey, is this coolant where it needs to be for proper freeze protection? So again, making sure you have that cold weather protection is really important. It's also helpful too, though. I know sometimes we talk about freeze protection, but also for that boil over protection as well. You know, that water can evaporate out of your coolant, and so if you don't have the right combination of water and glycol together, you know that affects the thermal stability of that coolant. So something to look at and take attention to. You'll notice some of the part numbers there. If you are using the ES Complete Oat coolant, again, that CC8998, that is specific, you know, in terms of the readout to that ES Complete Oat product. So that's just something you would want to pay attention to if you're using ES Complete Oat. Again, YouTube video, 4 minutes, walks you right through it. The last thing, I should say, the last thing here is on water coolants, water filters or coolant filters, however you want to call them. There's a combination of these things out here. You know, you can get them in standard service, extended service. There are chemical versions of these as well. So on the standard side, it's an immediate release where it kind of, you know, recharges with it's basically kind of pellets of that diesel chemical additive that will kind of replenish the system. And then on the extended service, kind of a slow release version of those chemical pellets. This is important. Again, remember, if we go back and we're doing testing and it's telling us, hey, you need to put this many units of SCA back in, be aware if you're pouring, you know, concentrated additives back in the cooling system, you also want to keep in mind if you're using a chemical water filter or not, because then we can get back into a situation where we're maybe putting too many additives back in the system if we forget, hey, I've got a chemical water filter on. Same thing if you're using that oat coolant. If you're using that organic acid technology coolant, you would not want to use a chemical water filter. You want to use, oftentimes people call them a blank, a blank, but really it's just a non-chemical version of that water filter. So something to pay attention to. And then on the cleaning side of things, so let's say you get an engine that's got a lot of buildup inside. You maybe have some of that corrosion, some of that rust and stuff that's going on, or you get that silicate gelling. We do have some cleaning products. The main thing you would want to pay attention to is what type of contamination do you have. If you have a soft contaminant like a silicate gel, or you've got some sort of oil, grease, or fuel contamination in the cooling system, that's when you want to use Restore. If it is an abrasive type of contaminant like a rust, excuse me, a rust, a scale, you know, solder bloom, something like that, that's where you're going to want to use Restore Plus. Main thing to pay attention to here, these are active cleaning agents. You don't want to pour this stuff in your engine, your cooling system, and like go off for a long weekend and come back. You're going to find a big mess. You know, I think the recommendation here is about 2 hours in the system, letting it circulate, and then you want to flush that stuff back out. So just be aware of that. This isn't something you want to leave and let run in there for 12 hours or something. Like 2 hours and then get it back out and kind of flush that system. All of our Fleetguard products, everything we've talked about today, I know we haven't talked filters, we talked coolant. All of our products are backed by a non-prorated warranty, which means if our product causes engine failure, engine damage, we really put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to either repair that engine back to working condition, or in the event it's more cost effective to buy you a new engine or your customer a new engine, we do that. And it's not prorated by mileage or hours. It really is the best warranty in the industry, and we stand behind that. And that's really, because we believe in our products so much. So if you're curious to see more about that, you can see that on the Fleetguard website, which is right there at fleetguard.com. I will tell you, I think personally, in my opinion, we have probably more coolant related materials on fleetguard.com than any of our other product lines we sell. We've got a coolant selector tool that, kind of takes you through some questions, and we'll kind of tell you which product we would recommend from a coolant perspective. Training is a big part of what we do. Obviously, we do webinars like this, but I've mentioned the YouTube channel several times. Go to the Fleetguard YouTube channel. Lots of great coolant related videos on there that are kind of how to. We'll walk you through exactly what you need to do. to use these products correctly and make sure you're getting the best total cost of ownership out of your experience. So I'm going to stop. I'm kind of been battling a cold. I'm going to take a drink of water. I know quite a few questions have come through. If you guys have other questions you want to drop in the chat window, in the Q&A window, now's your time. We got about 5 minutes. We're going to run through and do kind of rapid fire on questions and answers. So thank you so much. We'll just take a quick pause here. All right, so I'm seeing a couple questions come in regarding the PowerPoint presentation or the training materials. Yes, we are recording today's session. We do place these recordings back out on fleetguard.com. So if you, however you found us, you can go to fleetguard.com. There's a product training page where we have a calendar of monthly trainings just like this. We cover lots of different filtration and coolant related topics. We will put the recording of this back out there as well. We'll be communicating to you guys as well since you signed up and registered. So probably be looking for something to come following where you can see the replay of this material.
So Jay, there was a question that came through about whether ES Complete Oat is reverse compatible with lesser quality coolants. To answer that question, typically we don't recommend mixing of technologies, specifically kind of conventional with oat. We would highly recommend that you do a drain, flush, and replace if you're using a conventional. Typically conventionals are green, so it's kind of the easy way to identify that. But an oat to an oat is for sure compatible.
What if they're using an ELC or some kind of hybrid coolant? What about that situation?
Some ELCs are good to go, some are not. Of course, we would always recommend a drain, flush, and replace if you're going to change your product over. Now, I understand that's not always the easiest or the most applicable thing to do. So we can, we have literature out there about how to do an oat conversion, and that will, if you would like further information, just reach out and we can get you that sheet on how to do it, what we recommend for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. Part number for coolant blanks will largely be dependent on your system. So that will be, we offer a bunch of different thread pitches to accommodate several different applications. So it would be best just to match that thread pitch with the thread pitch of the blank filter. If you need any
We've got a
assistance with
piece
that.
of literature though, Andy, Andrew, I can send to you, and it has all of the coolant filter part numbers, all the water filter part numbers, so that you could look and see. I'm glad to send that to you when we wrap this call up for sure.
Another question on coolant system flush liquid. You should treat that as a used coolant product, and please do not put it down your drain, because you are removing coolant materials from there. So we would recommend that you just treat it as a used coolant. And then I guess the weird spelling of complete, that spelling, if you look at the normal spelling of complete, is a common word and isn't able to be trademarked. So we gave it a different spelling so that we could own a trademark. And I believe it also pays a little bit of homage to our filter business, because when you pleat a filter, that is how you would spell that.
That's a better answer than I would have given, Will. So that's great. It's a good question. It is a good question. And the ES actually stands for extended service too. I know we had that question before, so some good trivia for you guys. And we had the one last question there, how to determine maintenance or replacement intervals for an oat product. Do you want to just give maybe some general guidance on like oat coolant life, Will, and kind of, anything that I didn't mention today?
Yeah, I think generally oat coolants are good. Most of them are marketed or advertised toward that 1,000,000-mile interval. And so that would, 1,000,000 miles is a long time on a diesel engine. So it's kind of hard to say for sure that it would make it there. The biggest thing is to just make sure that you keep your maintenance up. So with oat coolants, again, you have a lot longer service interval, but just keeping your hands on that product and kind of testing it regularly would always be advised to make sure there's not other issues popping up.
Perfect. Okay. Maybe a last chance on questions. I know we're kind of at the top of the hour, but please let us know how we did. You can take your phone out, scan the little QR, and there's a survey. I think you may get the survey pop up in your browser window from Zoom when this closes out as well. We'd love to get your feedback. What can we do to make these sessions better? If there's other topics you'd like for us to cover, or if you've got any other questions or input, that's your chance. We love to get feedback on these and just make sure we're providing value to the marketplace and to our customers and folks that might be interested in using Fleetguard products. So please take some time to fill that out. And other than that, want to thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to be with us. I hope this was value added. And if there's questions you guys think of later on, please don't hesitate to send those over. Here at Fleetguard, we really strive to be the best in the industry, and we want to make sure people know exactly what they should be using, even if they're not using Fleetguard products, how they can best take care of their diesel-powered equipment. So want to thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Want to thank you, Will, for your time on here as well, and hope you guys have an awesome rest of your week, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks.